Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fluent English Journey. My name is Ava, and I'm very happy to have you here with me today. If this is your first time on the channel, let me tell you what we do here. This channel is all about helping you learn English naturally, step by step, without stress. Every day, we upload new episodes where you can practice listening, learn useful everyday words, and enjoy real-life stories told in clear and simple English. You don't need to rush. You don't need to understand everything at once. Just relax, listen carefully, and enjoy the journey. So, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's begin today's episode. Today's topic: learning English through daily life stories. Today, we are going to learn English through daily life stories. I will share some personal experiences from my everyday life. These stories are simple, but they are very powerful. They show how English is used in real situations, in a natural and friendly way. When you listen to these stories, try to notice how people greet each other, how they ask for things politely, how they fix misunderstandings, how they share feelings and memories. These small details will help you understand how native speakers think, speak, and express ideas. A morning at the bakery. A few months ago, I had a lovely experience at a small bakery near my home. It was early in the morning. The streets were quiet, and the air felt fresh. I wanted to buy some fresh bread for breakfast. When I opened the door of the bakery, a wonderful smell filled the room. I could smell warm bread, butter, and fresh coffee. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Davis, was standing behind the counter. She always smiles, and she always speaks in a kind and gentle way. She looked at me and said, "Good morning, Ava." I smiled back and said, "Good morning." She already knew what I usually bought, so she asked, "The usual loaf of brown bread?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, please. And maybe one of those croissants too." That was a very short conversation, but it reminded me of something important. Simple phrases like, "Good morning," "Yes, please," and "Thank you" make conversations polite and friendly. These small words help people feel comfortable and respected. A new customer learns to speak. While I was waiting for my order, a young man entered the bakery. I had never seen him before. He looked a bit nervous, and I could tell he didn't know what to order. Mrs. Davis noticed this and spoke kindly to him. She said, "Take your time. Everything here is fresh today." The young man smiled, relaxed a little, and said, "I'll try that round loaf, please." This small moment made me think about how tone and kindness make communication easier. Even when people don't know each other, a warm voice and simple words can help them feel confident. These everyday conversations are excellent listening and speaking lessons. You don't need a classroom to learn English. Life itself is your classroom. Lunch with a friend. Later that day, I met my friend Daniel for lunch. We often talk about our work, our families, and our personal goals. During lunch, Daniel told me something interesting. He said he had started improving his English by listening to short podcasts every morning while traveling to work. He said, "It's amazing how much you can learn just by listening carefully." I agreed with him completely. Listening is one of the best ways to build confidence in English. When you listen often, your ears get used to different accents, tones, and expressions. Over time, understanding becomes easier and more natural. My own language learning journey. Daniel's words reminded me of my own experience when I started learning a new language. At the beginning, I listened to very simple stories. I repeated short phrases out loud. I didn't understand everything, and sometimes I felt confused. But I didn't stop. Slowly, the sounds began to make sense. The rhythm felt familiar. The patterns became clear. The tone started to feel natural. Just like learning English, progress comes with patience and daily practice. Even a few minutes every day can make a big difference. A lesson from a neighbor. One evening, something unexpected happened. My neighbor, Mr. Wilson, knocked on my door. He looked a little worried. He said, "Ava, could I borrow your garden hose for a few minutes? Mine is broken." I smiled and replied, "Of course. Take it. I'll help you connect it." We spent about 15 minutes in his garden fixing the hose. While we worked, he told me stories about his childhood. He talked about helping his father in their small garden in the countryside. I listened carefully. His stories were simple, but full of emotion. That moment reminded me that sharing personal experiences connects people, no matter what language they speak. Learning from everyday conversations. When I returned home, I thought about how every conversation is a chance to learn. Even a short talk with a neighbor can teach you new words, new expressions, cultural meanings. If you listen actively and focus on understanding the message, your English will improve faster than you think. A small mistake at the grocery store. Another day, I had a small misunderstanding at the grocery store. I asked the cashier if they had whole wheat bread, but she thought I said white bread. She handed me the wrong one. I smiled politely and said, "Actually, I meant whole wheat, not white." She laughed and replied, "Oh, sorry. I heard it differently." That small mistake taught me two important lessons. First, pronunciation matters. Second, politeness makes everything easier. Mistakes are not something to fear. They are part of learning. Every English learner makes mistakes, and that is completely normal. A weekend trip and a warm welcome. One weekend, my wife and I visited a small village outside the city. It was very peaceful. There were green fields, fresh air, and quiet roads. We stayed at a guest house run by an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Parker. They welcomed us warmly and made us feel at home. During dinner, Mr. Parker told us stories about his youth. He talked about starting his bakery business and about life before modern technology. His English was simple, but full of feeling. Listening to him made me realize something important. Good communication is not only about grammar or vocabulary. It's about sharing emotions, memories, and ideas honestly. Simple words, deep meaning. The next morning, Mrs. Parker served us breakfast and said, "When I was young, I helped my mother make bread every day. That's why I still love baking." Her words were simple, but they touched my heart. Language connects memories, culture, and emotions. Even easy words can carry deep meaning. A daily English practice you can try. After that trip, I decided to create a small routine to improve my English communication. Every evening, I write a short story about my day. It could be about someone I met, something I learned, a small moment that made me think. This helps me practice sentence structure and describe experiences naturally. You can try this too. Write or record a short story about your day. Then listen to it again. You will notice small mistakes and learn from them. One very useful way to improve your English is shadowing. Shadowing means listening to a conversation and repeating it exactly as you hear it. You try to copy the same speed, the same tone, and the same rhythm. You don't pause too much. You don't change the words. You simply follow the speaker. This method is very powerful. It builds confidence and helps your speech sound more natural. When you practice shadowing, your mouth learns how English sounds. Your brain learns the rhythm of the language. I remember one of my students named Sarah. She used this method for only 15 minutes a day. She didn't study for hours. She just listened and repeated every day. After 3 months, her pronunciation improved a lot. Her confidence also grew. Sarah told me, "I feel much more comfortable speaking with my colleagues at work now. I can explain my ideas clearly, and I don't feel so nervous anymore." This shows something very important. Even if you have only a few minutes each day, you can still improve. Use your time wisely. Consistency is more powerful than long study sessions once in a while. A lesson from a charity event. There is another story I want to share with you. A few years ago, I joined a charity event to help clean a local park. People came from many different countries. There were volunteers from India, Japan, Spain, and many other places. Everyone spoke English to communicate, even though no one spoke it perfectly. At first, it was not easy to understand everyone. We all had different accents. Some people spoke fast. Some spoke slowly. But after a few hours, something interesting happened. We started to understand each other better. We adjusted. We listened more carefully. We helped each other. By the end of the day, we were working together easily. That experience taught me a big lesson. English is not just for grammar tests or exams. English is a bridge. It connects people from different cultures and countries. Language becomes meaningful when it is used to help others, share kindness, and build friendships. When you use English in real life, it becomes part of who you are. It's no longer just a subject you study. It becomes part of your personality. The power of listening every day. That's why I always encourage you to listen actively every day. You don't need long lessons. You can listen to a short podcast, a simple story, a daily conversation. While listening, try to notice how people express ideas. Notice how they change their tone. Notice how they react to emotions like happiness, surprise, or concern. Listening helps you understand not only the words, but also the feelings behind the words. A train ride and a wise teacher. Now, I'd like to share one last story before we continue. A few weeks ago, I met a man named Peter on a train. He was an English teacher who had taught in different countries for more than 20 years. We started talking about language learning. Peter said something very simple but very wise. He said, "The secret is not studying harder. It's studying smarter." He explained that real learning comes from life, from people, and from mistakes. I completely agreed with him. We talked for almost half an hour during the train ride. He shared many interesting experiences about teaching in small towns and big cities. One story really stayed with me. A student who found his voice. Peter told me about a student from Thailand. This student struggled a lot with speaking English. He was very nervous. He could barely introduce himself in front of others. But he didn't give up. Every day, he practiced in a very simple way. He described what he saw around him. He said things like, "I see a red bus. I hear children playing outside." That was all. No long speeches. No pressure. After a few months, his confidence completely changed. He could speak more freely. He wasn't afraid anymore. This story inspired me deeply. It shows how powerful small, daily habits can be. You don't need to make big speeches to improve your English. You just need to speak a little every day. Speak to yourself. Talk to yourself. Describe your surroundings. Repeat what you hear. These simple actions build fluency naturally. When I came home that evening, I tried this idea myself. I stood on my balcony and looked outside. The air was cool. I could hear distant traffic. I said quietly, "The sky is clear tonight. The city lights are glowing softly." It sounded simple, but it was very helpful. This practice helps you think in English instead of translating from your native language. That is one of the most important steps toward fluency. A moment at the office. A few days later, something interesting happened at the office. One of my coworkers, David, was preparing for a presentation. He looked nervous. I asked him, "Are you ready for the meeting?" He sighed and said, "Almost, but I'm worried about making grammar mistakes." I smiled and told him, "David, people don't care about small grammar mistakes. They care about your message. Speak clearly. Show confidence. They'll listen." After the meeting, David came back smiling. "You were right," he said. "They focused on my ideas, not my grammar." That moment reminded me again that language is not about perfection. It's about communication. If people understand you, you are already successful. Progress, not perfection. That evening, while walking home, I thought about how often we stop ourselves from speaking. We are afraid of being wrong, afraid of not sounding perfect. But perfection is not the goal. Progress is. Every time you speak, you improve a little. Every time you listen carefully, you grow a little. The more you use English, the more natural it feels. A lesson from university days. I remember a moment from my university days. I joined a public speaking club where members practiced short speeches in English. The first time I spoke, my hands were shaking. My voice was quiet. But everyone clapped and encouraged me. One senior member said something I never forgot. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be brave. That advice stayed with me for years. Courage is the real skill behind learning. A simple morning at a cafe. The next morning, I went to a small cafe near my office. The waiter greeted me warmly. Good morning. What would you like today? I replied, a cup of black coffee, please. While waiting, I noticed two people at a nearby table talking in English. They were not native speakers, but they spoke with confidence. Their pronunciation wasn't perfect, but their message was clear. I smiled. It was a beautiful example of how English connects people from different backgrounds. When my coffee arrived, I thanked the waiter and thought about how learning English changes everyday life. It opens doors to new opportunities, new conversations, and deeper understanding. Language is not just a tool. Language is a bridge. It connects people, ideas, cultures, and emotions. It helps us understand others and also understand ourselves. Later that day, I visited a small bookstore near my home. I love quiet places like bookstores. They make me feel calm and peaceful. The soft sound of pages turning and the smell of old books always relax me. Inside the store, I met the owner, Mr. Carter. He was arranging books carefully on a shelf. We started talking, and soon our conversation turned to languages. Mr. Carter smiled and said, "When I read books in another language, I feel like I see the world through someone else's eyes." I found this idea very interesting. It reminded me that English is not only about learning words or grammar. English is about perspective. Every new phrase you learn gives you a new way to understand the world. Before I left the bookstore, Mr. Carter showed me a small notebook he kept behind the counter. He said, "I write one new English expression every day. It helps me remember it and use it naturally." I love that idea. It is a simple but powerful learning method. If you learn just one useful phrase each day, imagine how many phrases you will know by the end of the year. Small steps really do add up. Learning never stops. That night, while thinking about my day, I realized something important. Learning never truly stops. Every moment can teach us something. A short conversation, a small mistake, or a simple story can become a lesson. Sometimes, you don't even notice that you are learning. It happens naturally, like breathing. The key is to stay curious and keep listening. A visit to my parents' home. The next weekend, my wife and I visited my parents. They live in a small town surrounded by trees and quiet streets. Life there feels slower and more peaceful. During dinner, my father started talking about how communication has changed over the years. He said, "When I was young, we didn't have the internet or smartphones. We learned by talking to people face to face. We listened carefully because every word mattered." His words made me think deeply. Real conversations are very important. Even today, when technology is everywhere, face-to-face conversations help us understand tone, emotion, and body language. These are things no textbook can fully teach. After dinner, we sat outside on the porch. The air was cool and the sky was full of stars. My mother brought us tea and said softly, "You know, Ava, when you were little, you used to listen to your grandfather's stories every night." I smiled as I remembered those moments. My grandfather told simple stories about kindness, honesty, and patience. His words were gentle but full of wisdom. Even though I didn't realize it at the time, those stories shaped the way I think and communicate today. The power of stories. Listening to stories has always been a powerful way to learn. Not only languages, but also life lessons. When you listen to a story, you are not just understanding words. You are connecting with emotions and ideas. That's why storytelling is one of the best tools for learning English. It helps you remember vocabulary, practice pronunciation, and feel the natural rhythm of speech. A walk in the park with a teacher. A few days later, I met my old friend Emma at a local park. She is a teacher who uses stories in her English classes. She told me, whenever I teach a new phrase, I put it inside a story. Students remember it better because it feels real. I completely agreed with her. If you want to remember new vocabulary, use it in a story or a personal example. This helps your brain connect meaning with emotion. While we were walking, we saw a group of children playing near a fountain. They were laughing, shouting, and using short English phrases they learned at school. They weren't worried about mistakes. They were just speaking freely. That moment made me smile. That is how we should all learn. Speak without fear. Enjoy the process. Let the language flow naturally. Practicing at home. When I returned home that evening, I decided to practice describing my day in English, just like I often suggest to my listeners. I said aloud, "Today I met Emma." We talked about teaching methods. The park was beautiful. The children were laughing. The weather was pleasant. It sounded very simple, but it was excellent practice. This kind of exercise helps your brain connect thoughts with language. A quiet morning practice. The next morning started quietly. I woke up early, made a cup of tea, and sat near the window. The sunlight was soft, and the street outside was calm. I decided to use that peaceful moment to listen to an English audio story. It was about a man who learned patience while growing his small business. As I listened, I noticed something special. The storyteller used simple words, but deep emotions. Every sentence felt alive. That's the beauty of good listening practice. You don't just hear the words. You feel them. After the story ended, I repeated some phrases out loud. One sentence stayed with me: "Success comes slowly, one step at a time." I repeated it a few times and thought about how true it is for learning English. You cannot become fluent overnight. It is a journey, and every small effort matters. A moment at the library. Later that day, I visited the local library. I often go there to read or work. The librarian, Mrs. Howard, greeted me warmly and asked, "Ava, are you looking for your usual corner today?" I smiled and said, "Yes, please. It's the quietest spot." She laughed softly and replied, "I thought so." Small conversations like this are perfect chances to practice natural English. As I sat down with my laptop, a young student approached me. He looked curious and asked, "Excuse me, are you the one who records English podcasts?" I nodded, a little surprised. He smiled and said, "I listen to your episodes while studying. They help me focus." That moment made me very happy. I told him, "That's wonderful to hear. Keep practicing every day, and you'll see how much progress you make." He smiled and said, "I try to repeat after you sometimes. It makes speaking easier." And he was absolutely right. Learning English happens through moments like these, small, real, and meaningful. That is one of the best techniques for English learners, repeating short phrases and listening carefully to how native speakers express themselves. When you repeat short sentences again and again, your brain starts to remember the sound, the rhythm, and the natural flow of English. You don't need long speeches. Even a few simple phrases can help you improve greatly. A quiet walk in the park. After spending a few hours at the library, I decided to go for a walk in the nearby park. The weather was pleasant. The trees were full of bright green leaves, and a light breeze made the air feel cool and fresh. As I walked slowly, I noticed an older man sitting on a bench. He was feeding birds and watching them quietly. His calm expression caught my attention. I smiled and greeted him. He nodded and said, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I replied, "Yes, it feels peaceful." He told me that he comes to the park every morning. He likes to enjoy nature and spend time thinking quietly. Our conversation was very short, but it reminded me of something important. Simple conversations teach powerful lessons. They help you practice listening. They help you practice responding naturally. They show you how real English sounds in everyday life. Accepting your accent. Later that day, I met my colleague Olivia, who had recently moved from another country. She was still learning English, but she spoke with great effort and enthusiasm. During our walk, she said, "Sometimes I worry that people might not understand my accent." I looked at her and said gently, "Accents are beautiful. They tell a story about where you come from. Don't try to hide it. Just focus on speaking clearly." She smiled and said, "That makes me feel better." That conversation made me think about how many English learners feel shy about their accents. But the truth is, everyone has an accent. Even native speakers sound different depending on where they are from. What really matters is clarity and confidence. When you speak with purpose and respect, people will listen to you. A community story night. That evening, I joined a small community event. Neighbors came together to share food and stories. Everyone took turns telling a short story about a challenge they faced and what they learned from it. One man, Mr. Ahmed, shared his experience. He talked about losing his job and starting a small grocery shop. He said, "At first, I was afraid. But then I decided to try. Every day, I talked to customers, listened to their needs, and slowly improved my service." His story showed something very important. Communication is not just about speaking English perfectly. It's about connecting with people through honesty and effort. When it was my turn, I shared my own experience. I talked about how learning and teaching English taught me patience. I said, "Every learner's journey is different. Some people learn quickly. Others take more time. What matters most is not giving up." People nodded. A few came up to me afterward and said they felt the same way. That moment reminded me again that stories bring people together. They help us understand each other's struggles and hopes. Writing to remember. After I returned home, I wrote about that evening in my journal. Writing in English helps me reflect and remember useful phrases. I wrote, "Tonight I saw the power of stories. They bring warmth and understanding. They make learning more human." Journaling is a wonderful way to practice English. It helps you organize your thoughts, improve your writing, and express emotions clearly. Helping a new learner at work. The next day, I had an interesting experience at work. My manager asked me to help train a new team member named Henry. He was from another country and still learning English. During his first few days, Henry looked nervous. One day, he said, "I'm afraid I'll say something wrong." I smiled and said, "Mistakes are part of learning. Everyone makes them, even native speakers." A few days later, Henry gave a short presentation. He spoke slowly and carefully. He made a few small mistakes, but everyone understood him clearly. Afterward, he looked relieved. I told him, "You did great. You were confident, and that's what matters." His face brightened, and he said, "I think I'm starting to enjoy speaking English." That is one of the best feelings, when fear turns into confidence. A message from a listener. Later that week, I received an email from one of our listeners. Her name was Sophia. She wrote, "Your podcast helped me get a job interview in English. I practice listening every day, and it made me more confident." Reading her message made me smile. It is always inspiring to hear how learners use practice to achieve real results in life. Her message reminded me of my own first English job interview many years ago. I was very nervous, but I prepared carefully. I listened to sample interviews. I practiced answers out loud. I learned useful expressions like, "I believe my skills match this role." "I'm eager to contribute to your team." When the interview day came, I felt ready. I made small mistakes, but I stayed calm. In the end, I got the job. That experience taught me something important. Preparation and mindset matter more than perfect grammar. Learning from nature. The next weekend, my wife and I spent time in nature. We drove to a small lake surrounded by tall trees. The water was still, and birds filled the air with soft sounds. As we sat near the lake, I thought about how peaceful moments like this can also help improve listening skills. Nature has its own rhythm: the wind, the water, the birds. When you listen carefully, you train your mind to focus. And that same focus helps when you listen to English conversations. My wife smiled and said, "You always talk about learning, even when we're relaxing." I laughed and replied, "That's true, but everything around us can teach something." She asked, "Then what does this lake teach you?" I thought for a moment and said, "It teaches patience." Just like learning a language. Calmness brings clarity. She nodded, and we sat quietly, listening to the sounds around us. On Monday morning, I attended a community meeting in my neighborhood. Local residents gathered to talk about how to make the area cleaner, safer, and more comfortable for everyone. People came from many different countries. English was the common language we all used. Some people spoke English fluently. Others spoke slowly and carefully, searching for the right words. But what really stood out to me was not how well people spoke. It was how patient and supportive everyone was. At one point, a man tried to explain an idea but couldn't find the correct phrase. He paused and looked unsure. Another person gently helped him by saying, "Do you mean recycling bins?" The man smiled with relief and replied, "Yes, that's what I wanted to say." It was a very small moment, but it showed something important. Communication is not only about words. It is about helping others express themselves and making them feel understood. Kind words make a difference. After the meeting ended, I stayed behind to help arrange the chairs. A woman named Rachel noticed and thanked me. She said, "It's nice when people stay to help. It makes things easier for everyone." Her voice was warm and genuine. I replied, "I believe teamwork always makes a difference." That short conversation reminded me how polite expressions can make daily interactions smoother and more pleasant. Simple phrases like, "That's very kind of you. I appreciate that. That helps a lot." These small words can turn ordinary conversations into friendly and positive moments. An unexpected lesson at work. The next day, something unexpected happened at work. The power went out for a few hours, and suddenly we couldn't use our computers. Instead of waiting and feeling frustrated, I suggested we do something useful. I said, "Why don't we practice our speaking skills?" I asked everyone to share a short story about a mistake they made and what they learned from it. At first, people were shy and quiet. But slowly, they began to speak more openly. One of my colleagues, James, laughed and said, "I once missed an important deadline because I didn't double-check an email." Everyone smiled, and he added, "Now I read every email twice before sending it." That simple story reminded us that mistakes are not failures. They are lessons. When it was my turn, I shared my own experience. Years ago, I once gave a presentation using the wrong slides because I didn't rename the file correctly. It was embarrassing, but I stayed calm, used a bit of humor, and continued speaking with confidence. After the presentation, my manager said, "You handled that situation really well." That day, I learned again that confidence often matters more than perfection. Sharing advice at a cafe. Later that evening, I went to a nearby cafe to read. I sat by the window with a warm cup of tea and watched people walk by. A young man sitting next to me was studying English using flashcards. I smiled and asked, "Are you studying for an exam?" He nodded and said, "Yes, for my university test. But sometimes I forget the words right after learning them." I gently suggested, "Try using new words in sentences right after you learn them. When you connect words to real-life situations, you remember them longer." His eyes lit up and he replied, "That makes sense. I'll start doing that." Moments like this remind me how sharing simple advice can help others grow. Preparing for a presentation. On Wednesday, I had an important presentation at work. The night before, I practiced my speech out loud. I recorded myself and listened carefully to my voice. Listening to yourself is one of the best ways to improve pronunciation and tone. It helps you notice where you can speak more clearly or sound more natural. During the presentation, I focused on speaking slowly, making eye contact, pausing between ideas. When I finished, several colleagues congratulated me. My manager said, "You spoke naturally and confidently." That compliment made me realize how much daily practice truly pays off. Simple English, strong meaning. After work, I went for a short walk in the park. Children were playing football, laughing and cheering. Nearby, an elderly man was feeding pigeons. I greeted him, and he replied kindly. "I come here every day," he said. "It keeps me active and happy." We talked for a few minutes. His English was very simple, but it felt warm and clear. He used expressions like, "It's a good day today." "I like the quiet here." His words reminded me that good communication is not about fancy vocabulary. It's about being clear, honest, and sincere. A family dinner conversation. On Thursday, my friend Daniel invited me to his home for dinner. His wife cooked a traditional meal, and we all sat together talking about life and work. During dinner, Daniel's son asked me, "Why do people learn English if it's not their first language?" I smiled and said, "Because English connects people from all over the world. It helps us share ideas and learn from each other." His wife added, "And it helps people find better opportunities too." That conversation made me think deeply about how language shapes understanding and opens doors. English as a bridge in life. Later that night, while walking home, I reflected on how English has become a bridge in my own life. It helped me make friends from different countries. It gave me confidence to travel. It allowed me to learn from people I might never have met otherwise. English is more than a language. It is a tool for connection and growth. A morning run and a final thought. The next morning, I woke up early and went jogging. The weather was cool and the streets were quiet. As I ran, I listened to a short English story on my headphones. The story said, "A tree doesn't grow faster just because you water it more. It grows at its own pace." That sentence stayed with me. It reminded me that language learning works the same way. You can't force progress. You can only stay consistent and let it grow naturally. At the end of my run, I met a man walking his dog. He smiled and said, "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" I replied, "It is perfect weather for a walk." And in that simple exchange, I felt once again how English lives naturally in everyday moments. We chatted for a minute about how exercise helps clear the mind and reduce stress. That short conversation was very simple, but it made me feel good. It showed me how small talk can brighten your day and help people feel more connected, even if they are strangers. Later that day at the office, our team had a group discussion about a new project. Everyone shared their ideas, and I noticed how clear communication made teamwork easier. When someone didn't understand something, we didn't get frustrated. Instead, we used polite and helpful questions like, "Could you explain that again?" or "Do you mean this?" These simple expressions prevented confusion and showed respect for each other. After the meeting, one of my coworkers said, "I like how you make discussions calm and clear." I smiled and replied, "That's the key to good teamwork, listening first, then speaking." That moment reminded me that good communication is not about talking more. It is about listening better. A conversation at the market. That evening, I stopped by a local farmer's market. The place was full of life and color. There were stalls selling fresh fruits, vegetables, flowers, and handmade items. The air smelled sweet and fresh. One seller offered me a small sample of honey and said, "This one's from my own farm. Try it." I tasted it and replied, "It's delicious." "How long have you been making honey?" He smiled proudly and said, "More than 10 years. It started as a small hobby, but now it's my main work." His excitement and pride were clear in his voice. That short conversation made me realize how sharing passion through words can make any conversation interesting and alive. Storytelling with children. On Saturday, my wife and I visited a nearby orphanage to volunteer. We helped organize books and spent time with the children. They were curious, cheerful, and full of energy. One little boy looked at me and asked, "Can you read a story in English?" I picked up a simple book about a small bird learning how to fly. As I read, the children listened quietly and carefully. Their eyes followed every word. When I finished, one of them smiled and said, "Can you read another one?" Their excitement touched my heart. It reminded me that storytelling has real power. It opens minds and hearts. Even young learners feel the magic of language when it is shared with care and kindness. English in everyday work. After leaving the orphanage, we stopped at a small restaurant for lunch. The waiter greeted us politely and asked, "Would you like to try our special dish today?" I said, "Sure." "What is it?" He explained the ingredients clearly and confidently. I appreciated how comfortable he sounded while speaking English. That moment reminded me that using English at work can build confidence and professionalism. Good customer service often depends on clear, friendly communication. When people speak calmly and politely, others feel respected. A quiet Sunday morning. On Sunday, I decided to spend the morning in silence. No phone, no music, just quiet time to think. I sat with a notebook and wrote about what I had learned during the week. I wrote, "Every day brings a new chance to listen, speak, and grow." English is not a subject to study, but a skill to live with. Writing those words helped me understand something important. Language learning becomes part of who you are, not just something you practice. Seeing progress in others. Later that day, I visited my friend Henry, a new coworker I had been helping earlier. He made tea and said proudly, "I tried to use only English this week." I congratulated him and asked how it went. He said, "At first it was hard, but now I can think faster, and I don't translate every word." Hearing that made me smile. It showed me that confidence grows through consistent effort, not overnight success. Learning together as neighbors. In the afternoon, I joined my neighbors for a small gardening project. We planted flowers along the sidewalk. As we worked, one neighbor, Mr. Patel, said, "Gardening teaches patience and care, just like learning." I laughed and replied, "You're absolutely right. Both take time and attention." As we planted flowers, we talked about family, culture, and simple joys in life. The conversation flowed naturally. I noticed how English helped everyone feel included, even though we came from different backgrounds. A message that meant a lot. That evening, I received a message from one of my former students, Clara. She wrote, "I finally passed my English exam. Thank you for your encouragement." I replied, "That's wonderful news. You earned it through your dedication." Her message reminded me that progress in English is not measured by one test, but by patience and persistence over time. A fresh start in a quiet town. After such a full week, I felt the need for fresh air. So I took a short weekend trip to a nearby town called Maple Ridge. It was a quiet place surrounded by hills and green fields. I stayed at a small guest house run by an older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Cooper. They were warm, friendly, and full of stories about the town's history. On my first morning there, I woke up early, opened the window, and felt a cool breeze from the valley. It made me feel calm and refreshed. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the sunrise. Simple words, deep meaning. Later that day, I walked through the local market. People sold fresh vegetables, handmade bread, and small wooden crafts. One man named Daniel was carving a wooden bird. I stopped to watch him. We started talking, and he told me he had been doing woodwork since he was a child. Then he said something that stayed with me. If you do one thing with care every day, you'll never feel wasted. His words were simple, but very deep. They made me think about how often we rush through life, trying to do everything at once, and forget to enjoy one small thing done well. The beauty of slow living. That evening, I joined the Coopers for dinner. Mrs. Cooper made soup using vegetables from her own garden. She said she never buys vegetables from the store because growing them brings her joy. Mr. Cooper shared stories about his younger days, when the town had only one road and everyone knew each other by name. Listening to them made me realize how much modern life has changed. We live fast, but sometimes slowing down can make life richer and happier. And once again, I saw how language, simple, honest, and kind, connects people, memories, and moments in the most meaningful way. The next morning, I went hiking on a trail that led to a beautiful waterfall. The walk was long and peaceful. It took almost 2 hours to reach the waterfall. Along the way, I met a man named Aaron, who was also hiking alone. At first, we just greeted each other with a smile. Then we started walking together and slowly began talking. Our conversation felt natural and relaxed. We talked about work, family, and life in general. Aaron told me that he had recently changed his job. Before, he worked for a big company in a busy city. Now he works for a small local business. He said the new job gives him more time with his family and less stress. He smiled as he talked about eating dinner with his children and taking walks in the evening. That conversation made me think deeply. Many people believe that more work means more success, and more success means more happiness. But Aaron showed me something different. Sometimes, less work can bring more peace. Balance in life is often more important than money or titles. A quiet moment at the waterfall. When I finally reached the waterfall, I sat on a large rock nearby. I listened to the sound of the water falling. It was strong, loud, and powerful, but also calming at the same time. In that quiet moment, I stopped thinking about my phone, my tasks, and my plans. I just listened. Life is often very noisy. There are messages, notifications, deadlines, and worries. But moments like this teach us something important. It's okay to pause. Pausing helps us breathe. It helps us think clearly. It helps us remember what truly matters. When I returned from the trip, I felt refreshed, calm, and clear-minded. Starting the day with something positive. On Monday morning, I made a promise to myself. I decided to start each day with one positive action. It didn't have to be big. Sometimes it was reading a short article. Sometimes it was taking a short walk. Sometimes it was simply making my bed slowly and with focus. These small actions may sound simple, but they made a big difference. Doing small things with attention can change your mood and your energy for the whole day. A lesson from a coffee shop. One day, I had a small but meaningful experience at a coffee shop near my office. The barista there is named Sarah. She always remembers people's names. One day, I asked her, "How do you remember everyone's name?" She smiled and said, "When someone tells me their name, I repeat it in my mind. Then I use it again before they leave." That simple answer taught me something important. Small details matter in human connection. Everyone likes to be remembered. When someone uses your name, you feel seen and valued. Speaking with confidence at work. A few days later, I had to prepare a presentation at work. Usually, I feel nervous before speaking in front of others. My heart beats faster and my hands feel cold. But that day, I tried something different. Before I started speaking, I took a deep breath. I imagined that I was not giving a presentation, but talking to friends. I began by telling a short story about how our project started. I even shared a funny mistake we made at the beginning. Everyone laughed, and suddenly the room felt lighter and more relaxed. That moment taught me a powerful lesson. Stories connect people. Even in professional situations, stories make communication feel real and human. Later, during lunch, one of my coworkers said, "Ava, your presentation felt real." That was the best feedback I could receive. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being authentic. Many English learners struggle with this. They want to sound perfect instead of real. But good communication is not about perfect grammar. It's about connection. Kindness in small moments. That evening, while walking home, I passed a small park. I saw a young boy helping his grandmother cross a path. It was a very simple act, but it touched my heart. It reminded me that learning a language is similar. It's about helping others understand. It's about patience. And it's about being kind to yourself when you make mistakes. Practicing English at home. Over the next few days, I decided to challenge myself. I started speaking only English at home. My wife helped me practice. We used English during dinner conversations, even when it felt a little strange. Sometimes we made mistakes. Sometimes we laughed at ourselves. But that made learning more natural and fun. One day, my wife said, "Learning is not about speed. It's about consistency." She was right. If you do something regularly, even for just 10 minutes a day, you will see progress. Journaling in English. Another habit I started was journaling in English every night. I didn't write long paragraphs. I wrote short reflections. One day I wrote, "Today I learned to stay calm when things go wrong." Another day I wrote, "I am grateful for a quiet morning." This habit helped me build vocabulary and understand my emotions better. Writing is not just about words. It's about thinking clearly. Honest conversations in the countryside. One weekend, I visited my friend Daniel and his family. They live in the countryside, in a house with a small garden full of herbs and flowers. Daniel told me that every evening they sit outside and talk about their day. No phones. No screens. Just conversation. That evening I joined them. The children talked about school. His wife shared something funny. The moment felt calm and warm. It reminded me that communication builds strong relationships. You don't need fancy words, just honest ones. A lesson from a baker. On my way home, I stopped at a small bakery. An older woman was selling homemade bread. She told me she wakes up every day at 4 a.m. to bake. I asked her why she continues after so many years. She smiled and said, "Because every loaf reminds me that effort creates results." That sentence stayed with me. Learning English is the same. Every small effort adds up, even when you don't see results immediately. Language connects the world. A few days later, I joined an online English conversation group. People joined from Japan, Brazil, Egypt, and Spain. Everyone had different accents, but we understood each other. One participant said, "Learning English helped me make friends from places I've never been to." That made me smile. It's true. Language connects the world. And every small step you take, every conversation, mistake, and story moves you forward. At the end of that week, I sat quietly and reflected again. I realized something important. Many of the good things that happened did not come from big plans or special events. They came from small, simple actions. Saying hello to someone, helping a stranger, taking a short walk, writing a few lines in a notebook, listening carefully when someone speaks. These actions may look small, but they slowly build a better life. And they also help build better English. A lesson from getting lost. One story came back to my mind very clearly. It happened a few years ago when I was traveling in another city. One day, I got lost. My phone battery died and I couldn't find my hotel. I felt worried, but I didn't panic. I walked into a small grocery shop and asked an old man for help. His English was not very strong, but he tried his best. He spoke slowly and used simple words. Then he picked up a pen and drew a small map on paper. That moment taught me a powerful lesson. Kindness and effort can cross language barriers. You don't need perfect English to communicate. People appreciate your effort. That experience also taught me something else. Never be afraid to speak. Even broken English is better than silence. Encouragement builds confidence. Recently, I started mentoring a new colleague at work. He is from another country and still learning English. On his first day, I could see that he was nervous. So I shared my own story with him. I told him about my mistakes, my fears, and my learning journey. I said, confidence doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from being okay with learning. Slowly, I saw a change. He started speaking more naturally. He even began making small jokes during meetings. That showed me how encouragement can change someone's confidence. Learning from everyday moments. Every day, I try to find one moment that teaches me something. Sometimes it happens during a conversation. Sometimes while reading. Sometimes just by watching people. One day, I saw a delivery driver greeting every customer with a smile. He looked tired, but his attitude was positive. That moment taught me that attitude matters more than conditions. You cannot control everything around you, but you can control how you respond. Making English part of daily life. In my daily English routine, I often listen to short podcasts while walking. I choose topics about real life, people, travel, culture, and personal stories. Listening regularly helped me get used to different accents and natural expressions. Sometimes I pause the audio and repeat a sentence out loud. It doesn't feel like studying. It feels like a friendly conversation. And that's something important to remember. Learning English does not always have to feel like studying. It can be part of your daily life. When you describe your day, when you talk to someone new, when you write about something that made you smile, every moment can be a small step toward fluency. A quiet Monday morning. The following week started with a quiet Monday morning. I woke up early, brewed a cup of coffee, and decided to take a short walk before work. The streets were calm and empty. The air felt fresh. I saw a man jogging and a few neighbors walking their dogs. One older gentleman, Mr. Lewis, stopped to say hello. We talked about the weather, and then he said something meaningful. I like to start my day by noticing small things, flowers, birds, and sounds. It makes the day brighter. His words reminded me that paying attention to details in life is similar to paying attention to language. Clear communication at work. At work that morning, I saw a new project on my desk. It involved communicating with a team from another country. I knew that listening carefully and speaking clearly would be important. So I prepared some simple phrases before the meeting. I even practiced saying them quietly to myself. That small preparation made me feel more confident. During the call, I spoke slowly and used short sentences. I made sure everyone understood. A colleague from Spain said, "Thank you for clarifying." That's very helpful. That moment reminded me again, communication is not about complex words. It's about clear meaning. Learning everywhere. Later, I had lunch at a small cafe. While waiting, I noticed two young women practicing English together. They were repeating phrases from a language app. I smiled and said, "It's great that you practice speaking every day." They smiled back, and we talked about learning methods. One of them said she writes new words in a notebook. I suggested using those words in short stories or conversations. She looked excited and said she would try it. Stories in books and in life. In the afternoon, I went to the library to return some books. The librarian, Mrs. Green, suggested a novel with simple but meaningful language. Reading stories like that helps you understand real expressions and natural English. Stories teach language the same way life does, slowly and gently. Learning happens everywhere. On Tuesday, I went to a park during my break. The sun was shining. Children were playing. Birds were singing. I saw a woman helping her child learn to ride a bicycle. I said to the child, "You're doing great. Keep going." The mother smiled and said, "He's learning new words too. We use English sometimes." That moment reminded me of something important. Learning can happen anywhere, even in the simplest moments. Final thought. Language learning is not about rushing. It's about living, listening, and staying curious. Small steps, simple moments, real connections. That's how English becomes part of your life. Later that evening, my wife and I prepared dinner together. We decided to practice English while cooking. Instead of speaking our native language, we described everything in English. I said, "We need to chop the onions into small pieces and cook them slowly until they turn golden brown." She listened carefully and followed the steps. While cooking, I accidentally dropped a piece of garlic on the floor. We both laughed. It was a small mistake, but it made the moment fun and relaxed. Using English during daily activities like cooking is very helpful. It allows you to learn new words naturally. You don't feel pressure. The language becomes part of your real life, not just something from books. On Wednesday, I joined an online meeting for a professional development course. The instructor asked everyone to share a personal experience related to communication. When it was my turn, I shared a simple story. I talked about a time when I had to explain a difficult process to a new colleague who was still learning English. I said, "I learned that breaking information into small steps and using clear examples makes communication easier." The instructor liked this idea and praised it. Other participants asked questions about how to practice speaking naturally. That made me realize again that clear and simple language is powerful. After the meeting, I walked to a nearby bookstore. I enjoy spending time in quiet places like bookstores. I like looking at books about communication, habits, and personal growth. One book caught my attention. It talked about how small habits can create big changes over time. I read one sentence aloud. "Consistency is more powerful than intensity. Small actions done every day create lasting results." That sentence stayed in my mind. I thought about how true it is for learning English. Practicing for a few minutes every day works better than studying for many hours only once in a while. That evening, I received a message from my student, Lucas. He wrote, "I listened to your latest podcast and tried repeating the sentences out loud. It feels easier now." I replied, "That's excellent. Keep practicing every day, and you will see even more improvement." Messages like this always make me happy. They remind me that progress comes from consistent effort and confidence. On Thursday, I helped a new colleague named Sarah. She was having trouble writing emails in English. She felt unsure and worried about making mistakes. I suggested a simple method. I said, "First, write your email. Then read it out loud before sending it." When she did that, she noticed small mistakes and unclear sentences. After practicing a few times, she smiled and said, "It's easier than I thought. I feel more confident now." Helping others is also a great way to improve your own English. Teaching makes you think clearly and use simple language. Later that afternoon, I attended a workshop about public speaking. The trainer talked about the power of storytelling. She said, people remember stories more than facts. During the workshop, we practiced telling short stories. I shared a small story about missing a bus and discovering a nice cafe while waiting. People laughed, and the atmosphere felt relaxed. That moment showed me again that personal stories make communication warm and engaging. On Friday, I went to a community center for a cultural exchange event. People from different countries shared stories, food, and traditions. I listened to a woman from Japan talk about a festival her family celebrates every year. Her English was not perfect, but her excitement made her message clear. I asked polite questions, and she answered patiently. That experience reminded me that confidence and effort matter more than perfect grammar. That weekend, my wife and I took a short road trip to a nearby lake. The drive was peaceful, and we listened to an English audiobook. The story was about a man who improved his life through small daily actions. While listening, I repeated some sentences out loud to practice pronunciation. By the time we arrived, I felt more comfortable speaking. At the lake, we rented a small boat. While rowing, we described what we saw in English. I said, "The water is calm, and the trees are reflected beautifully." My wife added, "The sky is bright, and I can see mountains far away." Describing your surroundings helps you think in English and build fluency naturally. After returning home, I spent Sunday reflecting on the week. I realized that every small conversation helped me improve. Asking questions, sharing stories, listening carefully, all of these moments strengthened my English. That evening, I received an email from a listener named Clara. She wrote, "I tried describing my day in English like you suggested. It helped me think faster and speak more naturally." I replied, "That's wonderful. Keep doing it every day." Feedback like this shows that real-life practice truly works. The following week, I tried something new. I started recording myself speaking. One morning, I recorded a 2-minute story about my childhood dog. When I listened again, I noticed where my pronunciation could be clearer and where my sentences could flow better. Recording yourself is very effective because you hear mistakes you don't notice while speaking. Another day, I met my colleague Henry for a short coffee break. We practiced explaining our work in English. I said, "I organize data for reports and check everything carefully before submitting." Henry practiced explaining his tasks too. These short practice sessions help build confidence for real work situations. Later that week, I attended a community cooking class. We prepared a traditional vegetable stew. The instructor explained each step slowly, and I repeated her instructions aloud. When I explained the process to someone else, I noticed I could use clear sentences naturally. Teaching or describing actions is a great way to strengthen vocabulary and sentence structure. On Wednesday evening, I took a quiet walk near the river. I saw a family feeding ducks and joined their conversation politely. I said, "The ducks seem happy today." The father replied, "Yes, they enjoy the food in the sun." Talking about what you observe is a simple but effective way to practice English every day. The following weekend, my wife and I invited friends over for a board game night. Before starting, we explained the rules in English. While playing, everyone described their moves and strategies in English. This activity helped us think quickly, communicate clearly, and have fun. Games are a practical and enjoyable way to improve language skills. During the evening, I reflected on the week. I realized how much progress comes from small, consistent actions, listening to stories, repeating sentences, writing reflections, describing surroundings, and talking to others. All of these contribute to stronger understanding and fluency. One important lesson I learned is that language is alive. You don't need perfection, you need connection. Every story you tell, every question you ask, and every observation you make adds to your ability to communicate naturally. The more you engage, the more confident you become. Even simple daily routines offer opportunities to practice. Making coffee, preparing meals, walking in a park, or helping someone, these moments are chances to use English meaningfully. When you treat English as part of daily life, it stops being a subject to study and becomes a tool to experience the world. Mistakes are not failures, they are lessons. I remember once using the wrong verb tense while explaining a past event. Instead of worrying, I corrected myself and continued. My colleague said, "I understood you perfectly." This reminded me that clarity and confidence matter more than perfect grammar. Another helpful technique is describing actions and objects as they happen. While cooking, I say aloud, "I add 2 teaspoons of sugar." I stir slowly to mix the ingredients. While walking outside, I describe the environment. The wind is gentle. The leaves are green. A few birds are flying above. This trains your brain to think in English naturally, without translating from your native language. I also make it a habit to listen to English audio stories while commuting. They are not just stories, they are examples of real-life conversations. Repeating sentences aloud after hearing them helps improve pronunciation and fluency. Listening actively ensures better comprehension and more natural speech. One afternoon, I visited a small art gallery. I read descriptions of paintings in English and discussed them with the gallery owner. I said, "I like how the artist used colors to show emotion." He replied, "Yes, the contrast tells a story without words." Talking about subjects you enjoy makes learning English engaging and meaningful. A few days later, I noticed a new neighbor moving in. I greeted him politely and started a conversation. We talked about the neighborhood and shared some tips. Using English in real-life social situations makes learning practical and enjoyable. Even small weekly routines help. On Sunday mornings, I spend 20 minutes reviewing new words or phrases I learned during the week. I write them in a notebook and make simple sentences. This small habit builds long-term memory. Recording short reflections about my day is also very useful. I spend 5 minutes narrating what I saw, learned, or felt. Then I listen and notice areas to improve. This self-feedback is one of the fastest ways to speak more naturally. By now, I notice changes in myself. Speaking English felt more fluid. I could describe daily life without searching for words. I could understand different accents better and follow conversations more easily. Confidence had become my strongest ally. Even small gestures, like saying thank you or I appreciate that in English, strengthen communication. Polite expressions create a positive environment and encourage interaction. Observing children also taught me an important lesson. Their curiosity and fearlessness in using language reminded me that mistakes are normal. When you speak without fear, your mind adapts quickly and fluency grows naturally. In addition to personal practice, I joined a weekly conversation group. Each week, participants discuss topics ranging from hobbies to current events. Sharing opinions and listening to different perspectives improves not only your language, but also your understanding of culture and ideas. That week, I also started reading short articles about daily life experiences. After finishing each article, I summarized it aloud in English. This helps improve both comprehension and speaking at the same time. Even ordinary chores can be learning opportunities. For example, while folding laundry or washing dishes, I narrate my actions. I fold the shirts neatly. I put the socks together. I wipe the counter clean. These simple actions become practice moments. Visiting the farmer's market again, I practice bargaining politely in English. "Can you give me a better price if I buy 2?" The seller smiled and agreed. Short exchanges like these strengthen everyday conversational skills. During walks, I describe my surroundings to my wife. The clouds are moving slowly. The sun is bright. The leaves rustle in the wind. Simple descriptions help your brain stay in English mode and make thinking in English natural. Listening to English podcasts daily continues to be essential. I choose stories, interviews, or discussions about real-life topics. Pausing, repeating, and reflecting on key phrases ensures that listening translates into speaking. Through these experiences, I've learned that English becomes easier when integrated into daily life. Whether through reflection, conversations, reading, or observation, every small effort counts. Consistency, curiosity, and connection are key. Even small daily rituals, greeting neighbors, complimenting someone, or describing your day, reinforce practical language skills. Observing interactions, listening actively, and practicing aloud strengthens fluency. Real-life experiences teach lessons that textbooks cannot. Watching body language, tone, and expressions adds depth to understanding. Feedback is also important. When someone kindly corrects your phrasing, it's an opportunity to improve. Mistakes are natural, and embracing them builds resilience and confidence. Lastly, I reflected on the power of stories. Sharing experiences, listening to others, and creating narratives around daily life make English learning engaging. Stories connect ideas, emotions, and words, helping memory and natural expression. From quiet mornings to social gatherings, from personal reflections to professional meetings, every day provides opportunities to practice and grow. By staying curious, consistent, and confident, English becomes a natural part of life. That Monday morning, I took a long walk before work. The sun was rising and the streets were peaceful. As I passed a small bakery, I saw the baker arranging fresh bread. I greeted him, "Good morning." He smiled and said, "Fresh bread for a fresh day." I laughed and replied, "Exactly. It makes the morning better." Even small interactions like this give practice in thinking and responding in English naturally. On my way to work, I noticed a man walking his dog. The dog was jumping happily, and I commented, "Your dog seems very energetic today." He laughed and said, "Yes, he doesn't stop until he's tired." Simple observations can turn into conversation. Observing your surroundings and commenting naturally is a great way to practice English daily. At work, I led a short team discussion about planning a community event. I encouraged everyone to share ideas in English, even if they were unsure. One colleague, Maria, suggested adding games for children. I said, "That's a fantastic idea. It will make the event enjoyable for families." Polite praise smooths communication and encourages participation. Later, I went to a nearby park to read. I saw a young man practicing English aloud on a bench. I asked politely, "Are you studying English for school or work?" He replied, "I want to improve my speaking skills." I shared a tip. Try describing what you see around you in English. It helps you think naturally in the language. He thanked me and said he would try it during his walks. Small advice can make a big difference. That evening, my wife and I prepared dinner together, describing each step in English. Now we need to chop the carrots into thin slices. I will chop them carefully, then sauté them with onions. Using English in daily routines turns ordinary activities into learning moments and improves vocabulary naturally. On Tuesday morning, I had a meeting with a client from another country. I made a conscious effort to speak clearly and avoid complex phrases. Instead of saying, "Let's consider optimizing the process," I said, "Let's think about how to make the process better." The client nodded, smiled, and said, "That's easy to understand." Thank you. This experience showed me that simplicity and clarity often matter more than advanced vocabulary. During lunch, I visited a small cafe where the barista always remembers regular customers. I said, "I would like a cappuccino, please." She smiled and asked, "Do you want the usual sugar amount?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, thank you." This short interaction reminded me how repetition and consistency help reinforce phrases naturally. Using English daily in small moments strengthens both vocabulary and confidence. In the afternoon, I organized my notes and reviewed new words I had learned during the week. I wrote short sentences using these words and read them aloud. For example, I enjoy walking in the park every morning. Helping others makes me happy. Repetition and self-practice improve retention and make phrases feel more natural in conversation. Later that evening, I visited a local library to return a book and browse for something new. The librarian suggested a book about daily life stories from different countries. I borrowed it and read the first chapter on a bench outside. Reading stories in English exposes you to practical expressions and everyday vocabulary that can be used in real-life situations. On Wednesday, I had an interesting experience at work. A new team member, Ravi, struggled to explain a point during a meeting. I asked politely, "Do you want to explain it in a different way?" He smiled and tried again using simpler sentences. Later, I told him, "You explained it clearly. Good job." Encouragement and polite feedback are crucial in helping others practice English while reinforcing your own skills. That afternoon, I took a short walk around my neighborhood. I passed a small garden where a couple was planting flowers. I commented, "Your garden looks beautiful." They smiled and said, "Thank you." Gardening relaxes us after a busy week. Observing daily life and speaking about it naturally improves descriptive skills in English. Later in the evening, my wife and I planned a small movie night at home. While preparing snacks, we practiced giving instructions in English. "Please pour some juice into the glasses. I will add a little ice as well." Using English in cooperative tasks reinforces practical language skills and encourages natural conversation. On Thursday morning, I joined a virtual English speaking group. Each participant shared a story from their week. I talked about my morning walk and my conversation with the bakery owner. Others shared about their families, pets, or hobbies. Listening to different stories exposes you to varied vocabulary and sentence structures, while sharing your own experiences helps practice storytelling naturally. After the session, I visited a park to relax. I watched children playing with a ball and narrated the scene aloud. The children are laughing and running. They're taking turns kicking the ball. Describing real-life situations aloud helps your brain think in English naturally. Later that day, I met my friend James at a cafe and discussed our week in English. I walked in the park and spoke to some neighbors. I tried cooking a new recipe, and it went well. Talking about daily routines in English is an excellent way to improve fluency without feeling like studying. That evening, my wife and I tried a new recipe for dinner. While cooking, we described the process step by step. First, we need to wash the vegetables thoroughly. Then we slice them into small pieces. Daily practice in real-life situations strengthens vocabulary and sentence structure. On Friday, I had a short meeting with a client from another country. I made an effort to speak slowly and clearly. We can start with the first step and check progress after that. The client smiled and said, "Perfect. That's clear." Practicing clarity and simplicity in professional settings improves confidence and communication skills. During lunch, I walked to a nearby bookstore and picked a book about a small town and its daily life stories. I read a few pages aloud to practice pronunciation and intonation. Reading aloud makes sentences familiar and builds confidence in speaking naturally. Later in the afternoon, I recorded a short story about my day in English. I spoke about my walk, my meeting, and dinner preparation. Listening to the recording helped me notice areas for improvement, such as pronunciation or sentence flow. Self-recording is an excellent technique for building speaking confidence. That evening, my wife and I went for a quiet walk around the neighborhood. We described the environment in English. The sun is setting. The sky is orange. A few people are jogging. Even small observations can become practice moments, helping English feel natural and integrated into daily life. Narrating your surroundings aloud turns ordinary walks into practical language practice. On Saturday morning, I joined a small group volunteering at a community garden. We planted vegetables while speaking in English, describing our actions and plans. I will water these plants carefully. I will remove the weeds nearby. Working together while speaking English provides natural, practical practice. Later that day, I met my friend Daniel for coffee. We shared stories from the week. I talked about my walk and conversation with the bakery owner, while he shared how he helped his neighbor with gardening. Sharing stories naturally improves fluency and listening comprehension. That evening, my wife and I reflected on our day and expressed gratitude in English. I am grateful for a calm morning walk. I'm grateful for the time we spent cooking together. Expressing gratitude is a simple but meaningful way to practice speaking and positive thinking. On Sunday, I spent the morning journaling in English. I wrote about small experiences, meeting people, visiting the park, observing daily life. Writing helps structure thoughts and reinforce vocabulary. I then read my journal aloud to practice pronunciation and fluency. That afternoon, I visited a nearby market to buy groceries. I spoke to vendors in English. How much are these tomatoes? Are these freshly harvested? Small interactions like these are valuable for practical language skills. Later, I walked by the river and narrated the scene aloud. The water is clear. Ducks are swimming. Children are feeding them. Describing what you observe improves fluency and confidence in forming sentences naturally. During the evening, my wife and I discussed plans for the upcoming week in English. Tomorrow, I will visit the library to return books. I will prepare dinner early. Planning and narrating activities in English integrates language practice into daily life. On Monday morning, I joined an online English conversation group. We shared stories from the weekend, including my community garden volunteering. Participants asked questions, and I answered naturally. Interactive sessions improve listening, comprehension, and spontaneous speaking skills. That afternoon, I walked through a park, narrating my observations aloud. The flowers are blooming. The birds are singing. People are walking dogs. Narrating surroundings helps your brain think in English automatically. Later, at a cafe, I ordered coffee and practiced polite English. I would like a cappuccino with less sugar, please. The barista smiled and replied, of course. Enjoy your drink. Everyday conversations reinforce polite expressions and vocabulary. That evening, my wife and I prepared a new recipe, describing every step in English. I chopped the onions finely. I sauté them until they turn golden. We laughed when I dropped a piece of garlic. Using English in practical tasks makes learning enjoyable and natural. On Tuesday, I met my colleague Sarah to review a project. I explained clearly in English. I have organized the data and prepared the report. We can review it together. She asked questions, and I answered naturally. Professional interactions strengthen language skills and context. During lunch, I visited a bookstore and read aloud a story about daily life. Reading aloud connects comprehension and speaking naturally. That afternoon, I recorded a short story about my weekend. Listening to my own voice helped me recognize mistakes and improve sentence flow. Self-practice and reflection are essential for building confidence. Later, my wife and I went for a quiet walk, describing our neighborhood aloud. The sun is setting. The sky is red. People are walking dogs. Narrating everyday observations builds fluency naturally. On Wednesday, I joined an online group discussion where participants shared personal experiences. I told a story about helping a neighbor with gardening. Listening and sharing stories enhances vocabulary and comprehension. Thursday morning, I woke a bit earlier and walked along the river. The water was calm, reflecting the soft morning light. I saw a man fishing quietly. He smiled and said, "Good morning. It's a peaceful day, isn't it?" I replied, "Yes, the calm water makes the morning perfect." Small conversations like this are excellent for practicing polite, natural English. After returning home, I made a cup of tea and started planning my day. Setting intentions in English helped me organize thoughts clearly. I wrote a short list aloud, reinforcing both language and focus. Monday, I started the day by speaking my plans aloud. I will finish the report, practice English for 30 minutes, and call a friend. Speaking your plans out loud reinforces vocabulary related to daily routines and personal goals. Later that morning, I went to the grocery store. While choosing vegetables, I asked a staff member, "Are these tomatoes fresh?" She replied, "Yes, they were picked this morning." I thanked her and continued browsing. Asking questions and responding politely in English strengthens conversational skills naturally. On my way back, I met my neighbor, Mr. Clark, who was gardening. I said, "Your flowers are blooming beautifully." He responded, "Thank you." Gardening keeps me active and happy. Talking about everyday activities with others practices vocabulary and builds confidence in social interactions. Afternoon, I joined an online English group. The topic was sharing experiences from the past week. I talked about my walk by the river and my conversation with Mr. Clark. Another participant shared a story about trying a new recipe at home. Listening to different experiences and expressing your own improves comprehension and natural speaking skills. Later, I visited a small library. I picked up a short story about a family running a bakery in a small town. Reading aloud, I focused on pronunciation and sentence rhythm, which bridges comprehension and speaking fluency effectively. Evening, my wife and I prepared dinner together. I described each step in English. "I will chop the carrots finely. Then I will sauté them with onions." She followed along. "I will stir them gently." Practicing English during daily tasks makes the language a natural part of life. Friday, I had a brief meeting with a client from another country. I explained a project update clearly. We have completed the first phase, and now we are reviewing results. The client smiled and said, "That is very clear." Thank you. Speaking in simple, precise sentences ensures understanding and builds confidence in professional contexts. During lunch, I went to a cafe and spoke to the barista. "I would like a latte with less sugar, please." She asked, "Do you want it hot or iced?" I replied, "Hot, please." Short exchanges like these reinforce everyday conversational phrases naturally. Later, I recorded myself narrating the day's activities in English. Morning walk, meeting, and lunch. Listening to the recording helped me notice areas for improvement in pronunciation and sentence flow. Self-recording is an excellent tool for building fluency. That evening, my wife and I took a short walk. I narrated the scene aloud. The sky is turning orange. A few people are walking dogs. The air feels cool and fresh. Describing what you observe strengthens the ability to think in English spontaneously. Saturday, I joined a small community project in a local park. Volunteers were planting trees and cleaning pathways. I introduced myself. "I am happy to help today. Where should I start?" One volunteer guided me, and we worked together while talking about daily routines. Volunteering provides a natural environment to practice English while interacting meaningfully. Later, I visited my friend Daniel. We discussed our week in English. I shared a story about helping at the park, and he talked about a small project at home. Sharing experiences in English improves narrative skills and builds confidence in expressing ideas clearly. That evening, my wife and I prepared dinner. "We need to boil the pasta for 10 minutes. Then we will mix it with the sauce." She added, "I will grate the cheese while you stir the sauce." Using English during routine activities reinforces practical vocabulary and sentence structure. Sunday, I spent the morning journaling in English, writing about interactions with neighbors, my walk, and volunteering. Afterwards, I read my journal aloud to practice pronunciation and natural speech patterns. Journaling and reading aloud strengthen both writing and speaking skills simultaneously. That afternoon, I visited a small market. "Are these apples fresh today?" The vendor replied, "Yes, they were picked this morning." I smiled and said, "Thank you. They look delicious." Small daily interactions like this provide practical, meaningful practice for English fluency. Engaging in short conversations at markets or shops is a practical way to reinforce English in everyday life. Later, I walked along the river and narrated the scene aloud. The water is calm. Ducks are swimming. Children are feeding them bread. Describing real-life events in English trains your brain to think and speak naturally in the language. During the evening, my wife and I discussed plans for the coming week in English. Tomorrow, I will visit the library to return books and practice reading. I will prepare dinner early and write a shopping list. Talking about future plans in English enhances vocabulary and sentence structure while keeping language practice relevant to daily life. Monday, I joined an online English conversation group. Each participant shared a story from their weekend. I told a story about volunteering in the park, while others discussed family activities and hobbies. Listening and speaking in a supportive group environment develops fluency and confidence. Later, I visited a nearby park, observed children playing, and narrated the scene aloud. The children are laughing and running. They are kicking a ball and chasing each other. Practicing observation in English is a simple and effective way to enhance fluency. That afternoon, I stopped by a cafe and spoke briefly to the barista. "I would like a cappuccino with less sugar." She replied, "Of course. Would you like it hot or iced?" "Hot, please." Everyday interactions like this reinforce polite conversational phrases and vocabulary. In the evening, my wife and I prepared dinner together. I described the steps in English. First, we chop the vegetables. Then, we boil the water for pasta. She added, "I will stir the sauce while you drain the pasta." Using English during daily activities turns routine tasks into natural learning opportunities. Tuesday, I had a short professional meeting. I explained project updates clearly. We completed the initial phase and are now reviewing results. The client responded positively, showing that clarity and simplicity in English are more effective than overly complex sentences. During lunch, I visited a bookstore and read a short story aloud. Focusing on pronunciation and intonation while reading helps improve natural speech patterns. Reading stories about daily life also exposes you to useful vocabulary and practical expressions.